interesting. And we are back. I don't even know why I started laughing just now, but we are back. This is technically, if you're counting, episode 15. I'm excited that we're here. 15 is an odd number, depending on how you look at it. Well, it's technically an odd number, but we are at episode 15. It's been an interesting last week, and I feel like I say that all the time. Like every time we get into these conversations, I always start off by saying it was an interesting last week. But it has been. I've been working on a lot. Some projects are extending further than I would want them to be. But as I was telling a few of the employees that unfortunately that's just the nature of business, and you just kind of roll with the punches. But we're here. We are going to start this off how we normally started off, with a exercise in mindfulness, and we generally do that. We're just focusing on our breath for 10 breaths starting now. Now that we are centered and here, we get to talk. Before we get to talk about creativity, I always start you guys off, or start us off with a brain teaser of sort, to kind of just get us here, present in the moment, in our mind, sharp. And the one I have for you today is, what am I, right? You turn me to the side, I am everything, and you cut me in half, I am nothing. What am I? And as you think about that, this is how I want to take today's conversation. If you've known me long enough, and I think you guys have known me for quite some time, at least 15 weeks. It's more because of the week I missed, but if you've known me long enough, you know one thing about me, that I've always wanted a son. And I have my reasons. I think the world needs better men. And as a work in progress, and a man who has gone through multiple different phases, and learning as he goes along, I feel like as I learn new things, as my life progresses, I think there's so much I can give to both my daughters, and as I'm saying this, I'm saying that I now have a son, not exactly a newborn, but he is still relatively young and new, but if you know me, years before, I kept talking about me wanting a son. For a while, I thought I was only going to be a girl dad, because I had two daughters, or I have two daughters before I had my son. And it's interesting because now more than ever, or now something I never really thought about, because naturally as my daughters came, creativity manifested itself, or manifested in them through their own. They found their creativity, is basically what I'm trying to say. I think when they were both a little younger, I can kind of see it take shape in different ways. And there was definitely some similarities, but as they grew older and their personalities developed, I can see a change in it. But it was easy because I went from having a girl to another girl. So it's like, all right, two girls. This process feels the same, at least initially. And then now that I'm here with a son that is about to start crawling and walking, and having more control of his life, what does creativity look like for him, and how do I facilitate that? And this should be as easy as just go with the flow, right? And it made me think of just my upbringing. I grew up in a household with two older brothers, And I remember my parents really wanted a daughter. And when she finally came, my younger sister came. I remember how difficult that adjustment was for my mother, because she went from having three boys who are every definition of that. We played every sport. We were competitive. We were into the same things. And when I say I played every sport, I played every sport. I was playing cricket because I grew up in the Caribbean. I played football or soccer, basketball, volleyball, anything with a ball. I could find a way to play it. And that was just us. And here came my little sister, and she wasn't so much into sports. She was more, if I think back, she was definitely a reader. She had tons of books in her room. She didn't care for sports at all. She wasn't necessarily competitive, but she was into music and the arts. And she would stay in her room and make dubs of interviews, and she would create these interviews with artists by taking snippets from their albums, the interludes from their albums, and create this interview where she's asking questions, and she'll take snippets to have the artist answer the question that she asks. And that was fascinating to me, even now that I'm thinking about it. And she was really young at the time. And then as we grew older, in high school is kind of where you decide the path you want to ultimately take. And I chose the sciences. I think all three of us, me and my two older brothers, all chose the sciences. And we took the engineerings, the math, the physics, the technical drawings, the woodwork. These were the outlets the courses and the curriculum that we took. And it was all, they basically seemed aligned for it was similar across the boys. And then, just like with my sister, she went from all the books in her room and to taking up the arts and business. And she ended up in business. And that when she made that decision of where she wanted to go was business. And now that when I think back at it or look back at it, there was more in the sciences. There was definitely more boys than there were girls. In the technical areas, there was definitely more boys than there were girls. And in contrast, in the business and the arts, it was the opposite, right? There was more girls in those spaces. And then it got me thinking, how does your gender influence your creativity? And I mean, I sat with this for a while, and I realized that creativity doesn't have a bias. Like, creativity is not one way for a particular gender and then another way for another gender. Creativity is creativity. What actually influences creativity based on your gender is society's direction or push, right? Society's guidance onto how you manifest your creativity. And that's what makes it interesting. So fast forward to today. I have my daughters, both originally, and I'm saying originally, now thinking that it wasn't necessarily an innate thing. It's what we naturally did as parents, the things we put them in, the outlets we exposed them to, for them to find their creativity. And then my first, she was always into the arts. I mean, she may have dabbled in sports, but she found herself in the arts. And she is a dancer. She's a thespian. She loves to perform. She's into the performing arts. And you can put her on any stage and she will show off and showcase her abilities. Did I choose that for her? I want to say maybe. I want to say, obviously, I helped influenced it. But I was conscious because if I'm honest, I really wanted her to play a sport. I still want her to play a sport, specifically volleyball, because my mother played volleyball and she was a really good volleyball player. And I think she played softball as well. And my kids are a little taller than average. Maybe because of me, I'm a little taller than average. But I really wanted that for her, but she rejected this idea. Oddly enough, we've been playing a lot of basketball recently, and she's leaning towards it. But her layups start off with a pirouette, a jump split before she actually lays up the ball. So it's interesting, and I have to judge her degree of difficulty, the lead up, before she actually makes the shot. I posted a video of it recently. But she found the arts, performing arts specifically, and that's where she flourishes. Always been creative. All of my children have always been creative, but for her, she found her creativity in the arts. My second daughter is a little different. She was into. We did introduce her to dance, and it just wasn't her. She would get on stage and just stare and then cry and then run off stage. But if you put a soccer ball in front of her, she's going to do amazing things. And then her mom advocated for her to play tennis. And she's a natural. Like at her age, she's at the tender age of 4 going on 5. She is a natural born tennis player. Her racket swing, the power, just her ability to hand-eye coordination, find the ball, and these things. And it's like, that's what she found. And she'll play other sports, she'll dance, she'll do other things, but ultimately she'll always find herself back on the tennis court. And again, if I think back, I want to say that I introduced them to basically the same things around the same time, and they gravitated to what they ultimately wanted to pursue. And for now, for one, it's the arts, performing arts, and for the other, it's tennis specifically. I mean, again, she's athletic. They're both athletic, but one of them, my second child, she's into sports. Now here we are with my youngest, the boy, who finally came, and a part of me always wanted him to be, or wants him to be, as athletic as his dad. I was one of those parents, or one of those kids who thought that they would be a professional athlete at some point. I really loved basketball. I tell people that was my first love. I never really got exposed to the arts per se. I've done stuff in music, but on stage performances, even though as a kid I would in summer camps I'd be on stage. I was usually the kid that they would call if we had some dignitary visiting our school and they need somebody to welcome, so they get the welcome note and all that. I was definitely there. I even remember days like performing actually on stage. And I was thinking about I did a lot of on stage performance as a kid. I never really thought about it until now. But I was extremely athletic, and I was gifted athletically, at least to an extent in my head. And I always said if I had a son, I would hope that he would have my athletic prowess, and have an affinity for sports. And then maybe that's how he would showcase his creativity and or be like his dad and pursue something in engineering and technology and all of these other things that I'm fascinated by. And then as I'm thinking through this, I'm conscious of my bias. And I want to make sure that I am not doing the same thing that society did to me, that I unconsciously did to my children, and what society has historically done to us based on our genders and assign roles and direction for our creativity. I don't know what my child, my son is going to be. I don't know where his creativity is going to take him. but I can guarantee that he will be creative because it's innate to us as human beings. But how that creativity manifests itself, I have zero control over. I can influence it. I want to influence it. But will I? I hope I don't. Because when I think back, again, of how society has influenced us as creatives, there is a pattern. And that pattern is, for boys, they are more into STEM-related type of activities and areas of interest. We push them to be competitive. We push them to problem solve. And we push them to sports. Not to say it doesn't happen on the other side of the spectrum, but that's what we traditionally push our boys to. And in girls, it's a little different. It's more performing arts. It is more music. It is more writing, creative writing. There's more of a communal approach to it where they're involved in things that galvanizes individuals and groups. And again, there are outliers, and boys occupy these spaces as well. But historically, if you were to kind of do the general analysis, you would see that we put our children in creative spaces that almost feel predefined. And I want to say it's unconscious. We are aware, but unconscious of our reasoning behind it. And as society is evolving and we're understanding or recognizing these models that existed prior to us, we're more conscious of it, and we're allowing for individuals and boys and girls to jump across areas of interest, which is not only unique, it breeds innovation because you have different perspectives and different experiences that now you can bring to creativity, and then allow creativity to evolve and grow into unique things that can ultimately solve problems. It can create new experiences, create new thought processes, and new ways of actually doing things. And even now, it's interesting because my oldest, like I said, she dances, and right now she focuses on ballet, jazz, and tap. And at her performances, I would go and I would see, and I remember asking her this question. It's purely my naivety or my ignorance. And I had asked, what is a male ballerina called, right? And I can acknowledge my ignorance in that because I honestly just did not know. And it wasn't new to me to see a male ballerina. But again, I don't know that how accustomed I was to it. But she, if I'm honest, was exposed to that, especially from an intimate perspective, more than I have. And she is the vessel that I use to now am able to normalize that, which I think is beautiful. Tennis with my second child is particularly interesting, specifically because if you ask me who the greatest tennis player is, my response is Serena Williams. And traditionally, when you think of sports, especially sports of this magnitude, of this popularity that is global, historically, the greatest of all time in these larger-than-life sports or cross-country sports are usually males. So to have a female who has been that dominant, and again, we talk about how creativity manifests itself in multiple different genres, and sports being one of them. to have Serena Williams as the GOAT, greatest of all time, is remarkable, because now, not only as my second child is appreciating the sport of tennis, and it allows her to showcase her creativity, there is representation there that she can see, and it becomes normalized. So in the future, it is not just one Serena Williams. There's I can't remember her first name, the golf. There's tons of, there's Sharapova. There's all these women who are in these spaces doing remarkable things. I think of basketball now, where again, when you talk about the greatest basketball players of all time, now the conversation, women have to be represented in those conversations as well. Music is the same thing. In technology, the arts, aerospace, we're creating spaces where these creative roles, which were once predominantly associated with one gender, is now becoming fluid. And there's a gray area now where it's a toss up on who the greatest ever in these particular spaces are. And that is a beautiful thing for not only us, for this generation, but for the generation to come. And that's something I'm excited about for my son, because before all of this, when I envisioned who my son would be, he would be, this was again before he was even conceived, just the idea of having a son, he would have been, in my head, the greatest athlete of all time. Like 2-3 professional sports. He'd be like the Deion Sanders, where he's like great at football and also great at baseball. But my son would just so happen to be great at basketball and football. And then on his off season, he plays baseball. Like just this. And then when he walks off the court or the field or the turf, he's this world-renowned technologist. And even saying it out loud now, it's funny to me. But if he's not those things, I will still be okay. Like I'm not gonna be bothered if he chooses the performing arts. If he wants to be an actor, or you name it. Like I'm more. I always tell people this, especially now as I've grown. I've seen people teach their children finances and business and multiple different things, and which I don't knock. I mean, again, creativity can manifest itself in multiple different ways, and it's always good to help your children be future-proof, especially with the dynamics of life and technology and everything else. But I always said there's two things I always want to make sure that I teach my children. The first one is always self-awareness, and then the second is how to connect to their creativity. And I feel like if they have those two skills, there's never going to be a space or an era or a time when they are not relevant and great contributors to society. No matter what version of society we have, no matter how society chooses to influence them and their creativity, no matter the stereotypes or the expectations that society has on them based on their gender, if they have those two things, I know that they'll be a vital part and a vital contributor to whatever society they're in, and then to the spaces they occupy. And that's it. I really don't want to spend like too much time on this topic. I think ultimately the point I was trying to get across, and I think it was just me, because I'm getting to this point where I'm transitioning I've transitioned from just a girl dad to now having a son, and understanding that, hey, allow your son to be creative in any aspect he chooses to be. And get rid of this notion that as his dad, I should want him to be these things and his creativity should manifest itself in these ways. And I'm saying that still believing that he's going to be the greatest football / basketball / baseball and soccer player of all time. Let's end this the way we always start these conversations. Back to the question at hand, or the riddle. It says, turn me on my side, I am everything. Cut me in half, and I am nothing. What am I? I am the number 8. With that said, always good seeing you. Always good creating spaces for us to talk creativity and just the idea of being creative and manifesting that. I'm not sure about next week because I have a lot going on. I might be traveling, and if I do travel, I don't know that I could take all this stuff to record. So always a pleasure, and I'll see you again next week or maybe in a couple weeks. Go be great.